The Bible, as one of the most influential religious texts in history, contains a wide array of narratives, laws, and moral teachings. Among its many controversial topics is the issue of incest. While modern society largely condemns incest as immoral and harmful, the Bible presents a more complex and, at times, ambiguous stance on the matter. This essay explores how the Bible condones incest in various ways, whether through direct accounts, laws, or divine approval in specific contexts. Incest in early biblical narratives. One of the most significant examples of incest in the Bible is found in the story of Adam and Eve's descendants. Given that they were the first humans, their children would have had to intermarry to propagate the human race. While the Bible does not explicitly state that Cain, Abel, and Seth married their sisters, it strongly implies it, as no other human beings existed at the time. Another prominent example is the story of Lot and his daughters in Genesis 19. After escaping the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot's daughters, believing they were the last humans on earth, intoxicated their father and engaged in sexual relations with him to continue their lineage. Though this act is not explicitly condemned in the narrative, it does result in the birth of Moab and Ammon, founders of significant biblical nations. Incestuous relationships among the patriarchs. The patriarch Abraham, a central figure in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, was married to his half-sister Sarah, Genesis 20:12. Despite this, Abraham is portrayed as a righteous man, and God blesses his lineage. This suggests that incest, at least in certain forms, was not inherently condemned. Similarly, Jacob, another patriarch, married two sisters, Leah and Rachel, which was later prohibited under Mosaic law, Leviticus 18:18. However, Jacob's marriages were not presented as sinful, and his descendants became the 12 tribes of Israel. Mosaic law and incest prohibitions. The clearest biblical stance against incest appears in the Mosaic law, particularly in Leviticus 18 and 20. These chapters list various prohibited relationships, including those between close relatives. However, these prohibitions were introduced long after the examples mentioned above, suggesting that earlier biblical figures were not bound by these laws. Additionally, some cases of incest appear to be exceptions to the law. For example, Amram, the father of Moses, married his aunt Jochebed, Exodus 6:20. Yet Moses went on to become the greatest prophet in Jewish history. This inconsistency raises questions about whether incest was categorically condemned or if prohibitions were context-dependent. Divine sanction or cultural acceptance? It is important to consider whether the biblical acceptance of incest in certain cases indicates divine approval or merely reflects the cultural and historical context of the time. In early human history, incest may have been necessary for population growth, whereas later, as societies expanded, prohibitions were introduced for social and genetic reasons. Moreover, while Leviticus explicitly forbids incest, earlier biblical figures engaged in such relationships without punishment, suggesting a shift in moral expectations over time. This evolving stance mirrors other biblical laws that changed in response to societal developments. Conclusion. The Bible presents a complex and sometimes contradictory view on incest. While later laws explicitly prohibit incestuous relationships, earlier narratives depict them without condemnation, and in some cases, even with divine blessing. This suggests that incest was initially tolerated or even necessary before becoming unacceptable in later religious teachings. Understanding these inconsistencies requires a consideration of historical context, evolving moral standards, and theological interpretation. Ultimately, the Bible's stance on incest is not uniform, reflecting both cultural evolution and shifting divine expectations.